Good afternoon, everyone. This is Brenda Harms. Thank you so much for joining us today for Converge Consulting's webinar on adult student recruitment. This webinar is an exciting opportunity, I think, for us to present the findings of a secret shopping engagement that we had been working on over the course of the last 60 to 90 days. And we're anxious to share our findings and some samples and examples with you all during the course of this webinar today. So thank you so much for joining us. We still have a number of institutions. We had over 100 schools register for this webinar, so people are still getting into the webinar. So I'm going to take a few minutes to take care of some details while people are still getting themselves logged in, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Just for your information, we will be recording this webinar, and you will have the presentation sent to you after the webinar. Typically, we will send that out yet this afternoon unless we run into a problem. So keep an eye on your email this afternoon or else tomorrow, and we'll get that presentation sent out to you. This webinar will also be recorded and available on our website. If you go to the references section of the convergeconsulting.org website, you'll be able to download the audio as well if you're interested in that. I also want to remind everyone that we will provide a survey at the end. I really want to ask you to take the time to fill that out. It is not a long survey, just a couple of minutes, but your feedback in relationship not just to this webinar but other ideas that you might have is really a critical part of how we put together our plans for the next year in relationship to things that are of interest within the field. So please take a few minutes to fill out that survey. And at the end, the survey will also give you an opportunity to submit any questions that we don't have an opportunity to get answered during the course of the webinar itself today. We only have about an hour, so I'm going to go ahead and jump in. As many of you know, Converge Consulting is a multi-channel marketing firm. We help colleges and universities from throughout the country to assist them with their marketing and recruitment efforts around adult students, graduate students, as well as traditional students. So really all things related to recruitment marketing, Converge Consulting assists with. I am Dr. Brenda Harms. I have the list here of the people who are joining me today and some old friends, so thanks for being with us. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a Senior Vice President at Converge and have the opportunity to do a lot of the work that the company does in relationship to adult students. So I'm really pleased to be with you today and pleased to bring you this webinar. As we ease our way into this webinar, I wanted to start with a quote that I like a lot. Early impressions are hard to eradicate from the mind. For those of us who are doing recruitment of adult students and graduate students specifically in today's market, we know that competition is fierce, and we know that most schools spend some time prospective students spend some time doing a little bit of secret shopping themselves and take a look around some different institutional websites, and then they turn their name over or provide their information and ask for more information to schools that have, to a certain degree, made a shorter list. They might not be the exact shortlist schools, but most adult students and most graduate students do ask for information from a good handful of institutions. Through qualitative research groups, or focus groups that I have done, nearly every adult student says they talk to at least 2 or 3 schools before making their final decision, some up to 6 schools before they've made their final decision. So that early impression that we are able to make is significant. And while your website, I believe, is probably your truest keeper of first impressions, the other opportunity you have to make a strong impression is in how you recruit your adult students. I am a firm believer that marketing gets people's attention, but recruitment is done by people, and it's the people part of recruitment that we're going to spend some time talking about today. Before we jump into the data, I do want to be very clear about the intent of this research. When we decided to very intentionally submit our email, our phone number, and our mailing address, and we actually had an intern do this, so it wasn't linked to Converge Consulting at all, but had an intern do this. The goal was not to play we caught you or got you doing something right or doing something wrong. The goal was really to evaluate and see how across the nation, all types of schools, different institutions were going about recruiting students. I have a real belief that every institution always has an opportunity to continuously improve their process, and in doing that, continuously improve how they recruit their student population. And so it's from a place of wanting people the opportunity to go from being good to being great that this presentation is brought to you today. Before we move into the webinar, I want to just expose my own personal bias in relationship to the difference between admissions and recruitment. When I think of admissions, I think of going to the movie theater. Very few people show up at a movie theater without the clear intent to buy a ticket and go to a movie. And there's that person, at least at my movie theater, there is that person who stands there and takes your ticket. To me, that's admissions. There is a process, yes, that people have to jump through, but most people are going to move through the process regardless of what's in their way there. With recruitment, I believe recruitment is a very intentional interaction and engagement that takes place between multiple institutions and single prospective students. And it's that process of recruitment, it's the building of relationships, it's the steps that an institution takes to let a student know that they're interested in having them there that can make all the difference in who that student enrolls with. So that, for me, is the difference between admissions and recruitment. And you'll hear me talk a lot about recruitment because I personally believe in the adult and graduate market today, we have to begin to shift more away from an admissions process and more to a recruitment process. So putting that out there right now. I also want to quickly acknowledge that change is always hard. For many institutions, the process of recruitment that they're following today is very similar to what it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, in some cases 20 plus years ago. And in reality, our world and how we need to bring students to us and move them into our classrooms or virtual classrooms and then across our stages at graduation has really changed dramatically. I don't for a moment underestimate how difficult changing recruitment process is, but I simply know it is a critical element for institutions who are hoping to be successful as they move forward. I also want to say that in the hundreds now of institutions that I have visited over the last several years, I rarely, well, nearly every school, and I'm always cautious to use the word every, but nearly every school believes that they work with their prospective students very well. Oh, we do a great job with that. Oh, Brenda, we offer so much personal attention, if this sounds like your school. You know, we do a great job. Our recruitment staff does a fabulous job, or admissions counselors or advisors, however you refer to them. They are amazing people and they do a great job. I am yet to go to a school that says to me, you know, I don't think we do a very good job with our prospective students. It's just not a space most of us are very comfortable with, and I think the belief at most institutions is that you're doing a pretty good job. And that's not to say you aren't. My goal behind this webinar is to say, how could you improve it? So take this webinar from that angle. I also want to add that most institutions believe that they need more leads in order to meet enrollment goals. Every school I go to, well, if we only had more leads, if we only had more leads. And what I often find is what people really want when they say they want more leads is they want more students who pick up the phone and call them or submit their form, respond to every email or phone call or effort at contact, come in with all of their paperwork and transcripts, fill out their application, do their financial aid, and sit in class all within a course of a month or two. That's what people really mean when they ask me for more leads. And I want to be really transparent in telling you I cannot find you more of those students, and neither can anyone else in the country. Those are the very low-hanging fruit students. Every school gets a small handful of them with every term start, but there just is no way to go out and find more of those types of students. So I am a believer, and let's flip that model and say, how do we do a better job with the leads we have to convert a higher number of them? And again, I do believe there's that opportunity for improvement at every school. Okay, so let me give you an overview of what we did over the course of 60 days. This has been a really fun project to work on, and I need to probably publicly thank our then internship, now employee, Allison, for helping with this process. Allison was our prospective student, if you will, and we went to 16 colleges and universities throughout the country and submitted a web inquiry form or email that provided email address, phone number, and mailing address. So that was given, asked for, and given to each of the schools that we reached out to. 4 of them were public institutions, 4 were private, 4 were for-profit institutions, and 4 are institutions that I'm referring to as nationally known. One of the pieces of information that I often have passed back to me when I say you need to recruit more aggressively or more intentionally is that we're a good school, we don't need to recruit. So I wanted to show you how for schools that I think for all of us would fall on the really good school or nationally known reputation type of school and how they're recruiting. We picked these quite randomly, and I want to be very clear about that. There was no intentional, oh, I'm a graduate of the University of South Dakota, so we're going to talk to the University of South Dakota. They're not one of the schools, by the way. We literally randomly looked across the country and identified some institutions. There's a slightly heavier representation in the Northeast, which I guess is consistent with the number of institutions in the Northeast, but this really is a national blink, and we have put together or grouped these together based on public, private, for-profit, and then nationally recognized institutions so that you can see institutions similar to yourself and how they're recruiting. I also want to just quickly say before we get too much further in that we identify none of the institutions that we have reached out to during the course of this webinar, and I think that that's really important. Anytime you are incognito knocking on someone's door and taking a look at what their process is, I think it's important that you're respectful to them in relationship to what you share with others. And so while I won't specifically call out any of these institutions, we will move through these as public, private, for-profit, and nationally known. All right, let's go ahead and dive in. So the 4 public institutions that we looked at, Northeast, Southwest, Midwest, and then the Upper Midwest. And what I'm going to do is show you for each of them how they communicated, again, with, remember, Allison, as she submitted her web survey. A few highlights from the public institution. The 4 public institutions together, collectively, sent out literally the exact same amount of information as one nationally recognized institution did. Again, when we think about that myth that nationally recognized schools don't recruit, not to criticize public institutions, but I hear that a lot from public institutions. Everyone in our state knows us. We don't need to recruit that aggressively. I hope that this stops you for a minute and says, ooh, maybe we do need to do just a little bit better. We did receive the classic mailed packet by one institution, and I'm going to comment a little bit more on the mailed packet here in a minute. We did receive one text message from all 16 of the schools we reached out to. Only one sent a text message, and I asked Allison throughout this process to also type up some notes about her feelings, reactions, and interactions to this process. Allison has just completed her undergraduate degree, so literally is kind of grad school age, I guess you could say, and has not been through this process, 100 times before like I have. I'm probably a little bit cynical, I guess, now in relationship to what this should look like or shouldn't look like. I went ahead and asked her just to make some notes about her reaction to the type of interaction she was getting. And I do want to say, because I get this question a lot, should we text? Her reaction to the text messaging thing was that it was, and I'm going to use her words, it felt creepy to have someone she didn't know sending her a text. For her, it felt like a personal space, and it was perhaps not something to do. I'm not saying that universally. I'm a big believer in ask. The worst a prospective student is going to tell you is please don't. But you can always ask, and some people prefer a text message. I also wanted to point out that the estimated average cost of the programs that we were taking a look at for the publics were between $16,000 and $24,000. And just for the sake of the conversation today, let's say that these were $20,000 worth of revenue for a school. And here is how these public institutions, I guess, attempted to recruit that $20,000 check. Not that we want to think about students in that light, but again, reasonably so. We all have our revenue goals. The University in the Northeast, Public University 1, did mail the packet, the mailed packet, and they sent it out. It arrived 34 days after we sent our inquiry. And that was it from this particular public institution. Now, I want to be clear, it was a very nice packet, had good information in it, nicely put together publications, but this was it. They literally sent the mailed packet. And I get the question a lot, should we even be sending mailed packets anymore? And I'm just going to go back to, this was 2 years ago, I was at a conference where a woman asked this question, do we need to mail mailed packets anymore? And it was interesting because a woman was there who worked at a purely online institution, and she raised her hand and she said, you know, we actually give people the option if they would like it electronically or mailed. And she said, and then we watched that for 6 months. And over the course of that 6 months, 75% of their adults who were pursuing graduate school requested the paper mailed packet, even though it was an online institution. So I think that is a little counterintuitive. Seems to still be something people look for, and that has been just a couple years ago now that I heard that comment made, but I thought that that was interesting. So Public University 1 did one thing, they mailed the packet. Public University 2, School in the Southwest, gave us an immediate auto email response, so just that standard thing that pops back immediately, and then 1 day later did place a phone call to Allison's cell phone. They did not leave a message, but they did obviously take the time or have an automatic dial happen, so there was the phone call. Also 1 day out, so the day after we submitted the email, we also got a text message from that school. The University in the Southwest is the one school that had sent out that text message, and these 3 points of communication, if we want to consider the auto email response a point of communication, were their 3 efforts. So within 24 hours, all of their effort to recruit Allison wrapped up. University 3 is a Midwest public, and interestingly, we submitted the form and got back a very nice customized email from a lovely woman named Elizabeth who indicated that they actually didn't have the program available online that we had asked about and that we should check back in 2014. I think of note is the fact that the program was listed as being available online right on their institutional website. I also think, and I am just going to go through here and point out some perhaps errors, I don't know that I would ever tell someone who was interested in my school that it was their responsibility to check back in a year. I think that the opportunity in most CRMs to go in and do some sort of a reminder a year out and send another note probably exists, and this was a bit of a missed opportunity for this institution. But perhaps the larger blunder, if it says on your website that a program is available and it's not, you need to fix that. I know it takes forever to get issues changed on websites, but this is a bad one. And then Public University 4 in the Upper Midwest did send an email the next day from a gentleman named Andrew, specifically out to Allison, but that was his effort. So when we look back and think about the 4 institutions that are publics, none of them attempted to recruit Allison or recruit Converge Consulting beyond, in any human interaction sort of way, beyond the 24-hour mark. The mailed packet that came just a month after we had sent in the email is the one exception to that. But truly, all effort to reach out was done within 24 hours and then stopped cold. I'm going to tell you, I don't think that's a long enough time to recruit. Let's move on and take a look at the 4 private institutions that we looked at. School in the southeastern U.S., central Midwest, northern Midwest, and then in the Northeast. A few high notes. We had one private institution, University 1, that made a real effort to create a mix by combining email with mail. And when I show you this, I think you'll find it's an interesting approach. We also had a private institution that actually picked up the phone and called. And as we were going through this, this was really the first phone call that Allison got back, and it really made an impact on her. She's like, wow, I've sent my information to half a dozen schools. These are the first ones that actually tried to reach out to me by phone, so it truly had an impact with her. The classic mailed packet was sent by one institution, but was also followed up with additional mail pieces, and I'm going to show you that here in a minute. And then the average cost of programs that we were looking at here was between $22,000 and $30,000. University 1, private institution in the Southeast. The automatic email response came right away, same day. And then we also got an email 5 days later just from the admissions office, not customized to from Brenda, but just from the admissions office. They also mailed a packet that came day 8. A different piece of mail came day 13, and then a third piece of mail came day 26. And while it was interesting to me, I checked in periodically with Allison as she was working on this process, and one of the things she commented on with this institution specifically is it's interesting when things keep showing up in the mail from them. that frequent reminder, and some of these were postcards. They certainly were not all big mailed packets. One was a postcard, one was a brochure, and then their actual, I guess, packet, if you will. But an interesting effort to mix a little bit of the electronic with the mail. Now, of course, again, in a perfect world, I would have mixed in a little more electronic and perhaps a little more human element of some phone calling, but I thought this was a nice try. University Private number 2 in the Central Midwest, we got the automatic email response back, and then 2 days later, we did receive a personalized email from a gentleman named Michael. And by personalized email, it was a standardly written email, but it was specifically from a human being. And our intern commented specifically on, some of these just say from the graduate school or from the director of admissions, and they don't really tell you the person's name. That personalization seemed to have an impact. So for this particular private, their price tag for this particular program was right in that $30,000 range, and they tried for 48 hours to recruit their student, prospective student. University 3, a private in the upper Midwest, sent in that immediate auto email, and it actually came twice, about 1 minute apart. And then within an hour, our phone rang, and that was a message from Regina that she had received our inquiry and wanted to talk further. 2 hours after we sent our inquiry, we also got a phone call from a gentleman named David asking, could we chat? And then we also got a same-day email from the admissions office a bit later, as well as a same-day email from Regina. And then after that giant flurry, all within a 12-hour window, 13 days later, David did a follow-up phone call. I want to compliment this institution on its effort. I like the idea of 6 points of contact. I'm not sure 5 of them all needed to be within the same 12-hour time frame. Obviously, spreading this out might have made a little more sense. And I don't know if this was some sort of a glitch in their system, that the email came twice, those initial 2 phone calls came twice. Not 100% sure here, but an interesting process nonetheless. And at least they worked on this particular prospect pretty aggressively initially, and then waited 13 days for the follow-up call. University 4 is a school in the Northeast. We couldn't find on their website a place to submit an inquiry form. What we eventually did, or what Allison eventually made note of having done, was she clicked Talk to an Advisor. That was one of the tabs. And then that listed off all of the different folks who worked at the institute within that program. And the first one was a person under general information. And so we sent an email specifically to that person who was listed under general information. We never heard anything back from this institution. And I guess probably the one big takeaway I want you to have from this webinar is, how clear is your inquiry form? After we compiled all this data, I went back to a number of these institutions' websites, and I went back specifically to this one and really dug. And they do actually have a tab with an inquiry form, but it's not very clearly labeled. It's actually labeled Have a Question. And while in theory I do think that makes a lot of sense, Allison didn't feel like she really had a question as much as she just wanted to know more, wanted them to send her some things. And so she didn't click into that aggressively. She went to the Talk to Advisor tab. The 4 for-profit universities. Quite a mix in relationship to the types of for-profits that we took a look at. The first one has both fully online as well as has branch campuses throughout the United States. The second for-profit does have fully online elements, but they also have residential program. The third and the fourth are both fully online. And I wanted to include the for-profit piece of this to simply give everyone that's on the phone, and I'm not 100% sure, I think we have 1 or 2 for-profit institutions that have joined us today, to give you a flavor of the offerings here and the types of recruitment processes that are being used. Some terrific, and quite honestly, some not very good. One of the for-profit institutions actually never responded to our inquiry. And while perhaps some of you weren't overly surprised to see that with a private institution, with a for-profit, I think this is surprising probably for many of you on the line with us. All the for-profit institutions who did reach out to us had phone calling as part of their mix. Some more aggressive than others, but for all of them, they picked up the phone and called. The classic mailed packet was sent by 2 institutions, University 3 and University 4, but the packet was sent later within this 60-day cycle. And I do want to be clear in saying we only followed this for 60 days. Allison will continue to get emails, I would assume, for over a year right now, but we only followed this for 60 days and are reporting that back to you. These 2 institutions mailed their mail packets later within this cycle. It appears to me that their approach is, if we can make the in-person, I'm air quoting here in my office, if we can make the in-person contact either through a phone call or through an email, that's probably stronger for us, and we send the mailed packet a little bit later in the process. The estimated cost on these programs are between $20,000 and $34,000. And I would tell you that none of these institutions would be deemed as being overly aggressive in their recruitment efforts. I asked Allison specifically, did any institutions were they off-putting with how often they were reaching out to you or anything like that? And actually the only one that felt very off-putting was the one who had texted her way back at the beginning that we shared about. The others, she actually had no negative feelings about, and actually the school she felt best about, that they really wanted her, was one of these 4 for-profits. Pretty interesting. Let me continue on here. So University 1, as I said, this was the school that we submitted the form via the web. No communication ever received, not a phone call, not an email, nothing. For University 2, this is an online institution. They have fully online programs as well as residential campus. Within 1 minute and within 3 minutes, we received phone calls from 2 individuals. First one, Alicia, second one, Brian. And I'm making a note of these names and things when people actually left messages that said things like, "Hi, I'm Brian. I'm calling from XYZ University. Love to talk with you about, I see that you just filled out an inquiry form. Would love to visit with you further." With this 1 minute and 3 minute response time, what I will tell you, for those of you sitting around looking at each other like, what, do they have somebody who's just sitting waiting on the form? For many institutions in the for-profit sector, as well as actually several that I know of in the private sector, they have almost it's an automatic dial when the inquiry form is submitted. So when you hit submit, if you've listed a phone number, your phone will ring within just a handful of minutes, and then someone will be there on the line to interact with you. Believing that if I'm sitting down and looking on your website, that's the moment, kind of that strike when the iron's hot idea, that's the moment to interact. So 1 hour after we submitted the form, Brian sent us an email. And again, pleasant, anxious to visit with you, that sort of a tone. 2 days later, we got a general email from the admissions office, so not real personalized, but fairly quick response. So within the first 48 hours there, 4 points of contact. And then there was actually 13 days from that initial point of contact, or 11 days from when we had last heard from this particular institution, before we got an email communication again from Brian. He emailed again on day 15, and also on day 15 picked up the phone and called us again, left a voicemail. 16 days out, we got that standard email again from admissions. And what you see here is that really after about a 2-week period, this institution, I'm not sure the phrase "stops trying so hard" is necessarily appropriate, but steps back a little bit. We got a standard email again at the day 57, and then a personalized email again on day 57. On day 50, and then on day 57, a follow-up email from Brian. So much about this in this first 60 days, especially those first 16 days, a little bit more of an intentional effort to reach out and connect right away, and then backed off to a slightly longer window of time before reaching out to us again. University 3, I think, is an interesting option and can really show you, I think, the benefit of a I won't say perfected, because again, you have to recognize the type of institution you are and what type of technological support you have to help you make these things happen, and we're going to talk about that a little bit towards the end. But wanted to show this because I do think it's an interesting example. Obviously, we got the immediate auto response email from this institution. Then 1 day after, Jason gave us a call, and he called specifically in the morning. 2 days from that initial inquiry form, we got an email. And then, I love this, 4 days later from that initial inquiry form, we got another phone call from Jason, and he called at night. Now, I want to be really clear. This was not by accident. For many institutions who have done a very nice job with their recruiting, part of what they track is time of day that they are reaching out to people, knowing full well that if I'm working 9 to 5, I might very well always be working 9 to 5, and your odds of catching me are better more towards evening. And this particular call came at around 7:15 p.m. 5 days from that initial point of contact, we got a really interesting email from a gal named Amanda, who identified herself as a community volunteer. And in looking at this particular communication, this is a student. This is one of their current students who has this title of community volunteer, who literally sent an email from the student perspective about what it was like to go to school there. Talked just briefly, and that's the key here. These are emails, brief being key. Talked a little bit about her life, very busy. Talked a little bit about her experience with the school and said, you know, I'm happy to communicate further with you if you'd rather speak with me. I really liked this idea of this community volunteer, leveraging a current student to let them visit a little bit with prospective students. 7 days after that initial email, we got another, that initial inquiry, we got an email from Jason. And then 11 days later, we got a call from Jason. This time, Jason called late in the afternoon. Again, see the mix there. Day 12, an email. Day 12, we also got a very standard auto email. It was extremely generic. That basically said, we've been trying to reach you pretty intentionally, and please know we're still very interested in talking with you. At 19 days out, Jason sent us another email, and this particular institution's communication actually goes on to 2 slides. At 22 days out, we got another email from Jason. And then at 25 days out, we got another email from that community volunteer, that student email again. 27 days out, we got an email from the Career Center. If we think about what we know about adult and graduate students, often they are very driven around career-related issues. So either I want to make more money, I want the next promotion, I need to do a degree or to do a graduate degree to keep my job, or I need to do this to climb the ladder. I really liked this idea of sending a note from the Career Center. Day 33, we had a pretty standard auto email. Day 36, another. And then day 41, and remember I said the mailed packet was sent, came in the mail day 41. Again, I think with the timing and Allison's reaction to it was a really strong reminder about the thing, because she took a minute and opened it and looked at it. And it was a strong reminder of the things she had remembered when she had looked at this school online. And then obviously, again, another standard email at day 51. So if we look at this, and I'm going to jump back a second, 17 points of contact in over the course of 60 days or 2 months. Now, for some of you, you might be saying, wow, this feels extraordinarily aggressive, much too much, way too many points of contact here. This is over the top. If you really dig in and look, it was actually only a couple of phone calls, 3. All the rest were electronic communication, most from individuals, but they mixed up who those individuals were from, and then kind of that standard automatic email towards the end. Another piece of this that I think is very interesting, and I speak to it in one of the final slides, is that this particular institution offered to connect our secret shopper to career services, an academic dean, as well as financial aid. So in those phone messages, what they said is, I might not be the right person for you to talk to, but I'm happy to share with you contact information for some other areas if that would be helpful. For-profit institution number 4, again, purely online, follows a little bit of a similar pattern, although you'll see far fewer phone calls where messages were left and offers were made. Obviously, the automatic call, we left no message, and then 13 hours after our inquiry, we did get a call and message from Vanessa. Automatic email, 2 efforts at phone calls, one at the 19-hour mark, one at the 3-day mark. No messages were left either time. Again, and I get asked this question, do we leave messages? Is that a good idea? A lot of people utilize their cell phones or provide cell phone numbers on these. I know if you've called me anyway, in my opinion, you might as well leave a message. And if you do want to call twice in one day, I'd go ahead and say that on the first message. I'm going to call you back this evening in hopes that I can catch you at a better time. Day 3. Got a very standardized email. We got another phone call day 7, no message was left. And then we begin to see the automatic emails here, or the standard canned emails. And that was really the bulk of what came from this institution. Now, what's interesting here, again, that mailed mix, on day 21, so 3 weeks after we submitted our inquiry here, we received a piece of mail, and then again day 51, kind of that reminder. And day 51 was just a postcard, but still that reminder and that staying in front of an institution. Now, or excuse me, in front of a prospective student by your institution. Now again, I do want to point out what we got here was one phone message from somebody whose name we could actually identify. Other than that, everything was very standard, very canned. This is clearly all set up in the CRM, and it just cranks along. Perhaps not perfect, but there are a lot of points of communication here. Okay, let's take a quick look here at the 4 nationally known institutions because I want to have plenty of time with my final slides. For those of you who've been on previous webinars with me, you know I usually have to race at the end, and I'm really trying to avoid that today. For these nationally known institutions, as I said, one of the things that I get a lot from institutions where I go and I say, you know, your recruitment process could use some dusting off, is that I'm frequently informed that they're a good school and they don't have to recruit that way. That if they recruit intentionally, they will be perceived as a lower class school. And for those of you who are sitting in a room with colleagues and looking at each other right now, yes, I'm talking to you. This is very, very common. And I will tell you, I hear this from all sorts of schools. As far as the overall caliber of that institution. This is a very common belief that if we recruit aggressively, if we act interested in a prospective student or too interested, it will be off-putting to them and we will seem desperate. In reality, and I'm kind of previewing some of my final slides, in reality, all of us want to feel wanted. All of us want to feel courted and feel like we are important to some degree to an institution. And I'm certainly not suggesting pick up the phone and call me 18 times a day, or am I suggesting perhaps the single most for-profit approach I've ever seen, 22 phone calls in 5 days. I'm not suggesting that. Let's not go crazy here. But most schools, even good schools, can afford to be a bit more intentional in their process for recruitment. Okay. At all 4 of the nationally known schools, we inquired regarding a program that would be considered competitive. And I think that that's important because, again, when I talk to schools, one of the things I often hear is, we don't really need to recruit very aggressively for that program because it always fills up. So we were very intentional about trying to figure out if it's a very competitive program, will anyone make an effort to recruit us? The classic mail packet was sent out by 2 institutions, and both of them would be considered to be very well-known brand institutions. So again, that notion of we're a better school, we don't have to do that, not necessarily true. And the price tag for the programs we were inquiring about was between $38,000 and $50,000. So pretty significant chunk of change there for most. First school in the Northeast, we got a 1-day, literally to the minute, 24-hour delayed, canned auto email that came back to us saying, you know, thank you for your inquiry. We will be following up. And again, remember, this is a brand recognized institution. 24-hour delay, we got the email. 5 days later, we got another, again, very standard automatic email, came out not from a specific individual, but we did get reached out to day 5. Also day 5, we received our mailed packet. Day 11, we got that standard email, day 16, and day 45. Now, part of why I was very interested in how this particular institution recruited, again, well-known institution, and despite the fact that they were just standardized, set up, and plugged into the CRM, went out automatically, this very good school for whom we had interest in a very good program that I know has never had, you know, any issues with getting filled, we still got 6 points of contact from these people. They took the time to do the mail packet, but they also had these standard emails set up. 6 points of contact in 45 days. And if you look, 5 of them roughly within the first 2 weeks. Nationally known school. The second institution was an institution in the Southeast. 1 minute after we sent in our inquiry form, we did get back kind of that standard email from the Director of Graduate Admissions. This was the only information we received from this particular institution, but a very nice letter from the Director of Graduate Admissions. The nationally known in the Northeast, 1 minute later, we got the standard response. Again, Director of Graduate Admissions. Day 1, we received an email from an individual named Cynthia, member of the admissions team from this particular graduate school. Day 7, we got another email from a woman named Sherry, Again, these were felt fairly personal. Now, no one sat down and typed out this whole email by any stretch. It was the standard paragraphs. But again, because people's names were included, this is my personal email address, this is my personal number to reach me at. These felt more intimate, if you will, than some of the canned responses that came. And then 14 days later, we received the mail packet from this institution. And then our fourth university is School in the West. And we did receive a standard automatic email that came back, thanks for your inquiry. And then 1 hour later, we did receive an actual, again, pre-populated sort of email, but from a gentleman named Michael, expressing his interest to visit with us further if we'd like to reach back out. So 2 efforts here by this particular institution. I want to move into my summary slides and some of my more action item based slides for all of you. And I hope that seeing how different institutions are reaching out gives you at least some sense of the wide depth and breadth of the types of recruitment that's out there right now. I want to start by saying there's not a standard perfect recruitment model that everyone can and should follow. The model that most schools utilize to some degree is influenced by the types of technologies that you have available. Now, I'm going to say that, but then I'm also going to direct you down to the second to the last bullet. Even without any technology, some sort of process can be put in place. So we cannot use that as our excuse. And I hear that a lot. Well, we don't have the proper CRM, so we can't really do that. We can't really do that. We can't really do that. You can put something in place. Even if it's a very manual process, you can put something in place that gives you some amount of technology-assisted reaching out to your prospective students. So while there isn't a perfect recruitment model in place, I think for most of our public and private institutions across the country, as well as even a number of these nationally known institutions, it's really about the idea of a mix and creating a mix that is routinely followed. I do believe every school has an opportunity to do a better job with their recruitment, and often that's not about finding the magic combination. It's about following a process and just following it routinely over and over and over. I can't say for every school you have to have 15 points of contact in 60 days or it's just not going to get the job done. If right now you send the mailed packet and you are able to move to implementing the mailed packet, 2 emails, and 1 phone call, 4 points of contact in 2 weeks, you have just made a huge step forward. So rather than saying, well, what's perfect, and then telling, talking to one another about all the reasons why you can't implement what you believe to be the perfect model, look at how you can go from where you're at today and move 2 or 3 steps forward. That's the key. But it has to be a standard process, and it has to be a standard process that everyone follows. Even Betty, who's your top recruiter, who says, well, that's all nice and fine and good for everybody else, but I've got my own process, and I always make my numbers, so I don't really need to follow that process. Everyone needs to follow a process, because in the event Betty wins the lottery and doesn't come to work tomorrow, you don't want every one of Betty's leads to all of a sudden be a bumbling mess and no one knows who or how they have been connected with over the course of the last several weeks. Next one, personalization of even canned emails makes it a little bit better. And by personalization, again, I mean, can we include somebody's name, personal email address, not the, admissions at admissions@brendaharmsuniversity.edu, but truly, Brenda@convergeconsulting.org, that personalized email. Can we include that information as well as a direct phone contact? And at least in that effort, make it feel familiar. The other thing that I'm going to tell you in relationship to personalization, and in a minute when we get to the embarrassing moments, you'll understand why. When you're personalizing that, obviously a lot of that is just automatically populated via technology. Make sure you have that populating properly. Dear Harms does not really resonate as much as Dear Brenda does. And again, that was an error that we saw in one of our canned emails that came across. It was obviously just a technology glitch, but no one apparently had recognized it. I doubt we were the first people who that had happened to. How you recruit, or if you recruit, is not a reflection on how good of a school you are. A number of years ago, I had the opportunity to help a very strong institution within the nation, and they were really struggling with applications to several of their graduate programs. And when we really pulled it apart, what I said was, why is no one picking up the phone and reaching out to these people? And there was a real belief among the faculty that if we called people, we would be slimy. We would be perceived as not being a good school. We are, after all, so-and-so. We don't have to call. It's interesting to me that we feel that way about recruitment, but we certainly don't feel that way about fundraising. Think about the reaching out that we do, the personal contacts that we do in fundraising and in development in relationship to people that we believe will give us a lot of money or even some money. If you flip that model and you say, okay, we're a private institution and our degree is $40,000, that's enrollment revenue. I'm not willing to pick up the phone to invite someone to write me a check for that amount of money. Feels a little incongruent. Even the good schools recruit. Depending on your level of complexity, technology is crucial. Unfortunately, I still occasionally stumble across institutions that don't have CRMs that are able to assist them in getting communications sent out routinely. And while that's certainly not ideal, and I'm happy to champion the notion of every school needs a CRM, realistically, I don't want you to wait 14 months until that CRM gets implemented. Again, the feedback from many schools, well, we're in the process. So once we have our CRM in place, then we'll put a recruitment process in place. Don't wait. It often takes longer than we anticipate it will, and the time is now. How many opportunities are slipping past you while you're not acting now? So what can you set in place? And again, make this so that it's something that is manageable from a manual perspective. So anybody who sent an inquiry in this week, perhaps next week on Tuesday, gets this email sent out to them. While that's certainly not ideal, it is a process most schools can handle doing on a more manual basis. So set something up. Remember, the goal here is not to get to perfect. The goal here is to make a step towards better. That process in place, even with that technology, touched on it. And then process and accountability are honestly the two things that are lacking at most institutions and in most recruitment shops. I know a couple of people at some of the schools that we secret shopped and reached out to them and simply said, so what is your process for recruiting? And boy, every one of their recruitment staff could rattle off for me, well, we do this, and then we do this, and then we do this, and then we do this. And interestingly, that wasn't what they actually did, with us at least, when we submitted our name. So having a process in place and having accountabilities in place to double check that process are really two different things. And I will tell you, most college presidents tell me, oh, I know our enrollment folks, they're tip-top, and I'm sure they've got a great process in place. And many college presidents are embarrassed and stunned when I say, wow, I secret shopped your school. They never got back to me once. I don't think that's intentionally people not doing their job, but we all need to have accountabilities to make sure that we are doing our jobs to the best of our ability. And unfortunately, I think, particularly in higher ed, as well as in recruitment, sometimes I think we view accountability as kind of big brother and a negative, when in reality, accountability helps us all. Because often what accountability uncovers for us is, I'm really good in these areas, and in these areas is where I need some help. And so by having weekly meetings with recruitment staff and checking in on what, I have an expectation of X number of phone calls per week, checking in to make sure those things happen, looking at the phone numbers that were dialed this week, those sorts of things really create that sense of, so where do I need to do better to enroll more students? I've rarely met a recruiter who doesn't want to meet their goals. Let me share with you, because we committed to sharing, let me share with you some of what I think were the bigger oopses for some of the institutions that we reached out to. And some of these are part of this these 16 schools, and some of these are some of the big oopses that I have stumbled across in my opportunities that I've taken to secret shop different schools. The empty envelope. This is perhaps one of my favorite stories. I still have this. In fact, I can eyeball this envelope right now. The institution, it is a good school, that literally mailed me a white envelope that I'm sure was supposed to have the mail. My apologies, I'm not sure why that just came on, so sorry. That was supposed to have the mailed packet in it, and instead had nothing in it. I just got the empty envelope. The wrong name, Dear Harms, or the mailed packet that came to harms Brenda instead of Brenda harms, those sorts of things. Those are fairly common. Depending upon your name, those can be pretty crazy sometimes. Some of my favorites are the phone messages that have completely gone amok for recruiters. A lot of institutions have a very standard statement that they want read when you do get a phone message, and unfortunately sometimes it's painfully obvious that someone is literally sitting there reading it word for word. So the phone message that starts, Dear Bob, or not Dear Bob, I'm sorry, Hi Bob, sorry I missed you. Oh wait, this isn't Bob, this is Brenda. Oh, hi Brenda, sorry I missed you. That whole piece, part of this is a training issue. We have to help our recruitment staff to not sound quite so scripted when they're leaving these types of messages so that they can think on their feet a bit. The schools who have never followed up, and this list just goes on and on. There's one particular institution that I honestly, I just want to see some of their electronic communications. For a number of reasons. I'm very interested in what they're doing, and I have literally submitted my personal information as an inquiry 4 different times, and I'm yet to get the follow-up from them that I know they're sending. I have a friend who actually attends this school, and what they got during this process, their process was amazing. I can't get them to respond to me. I'm going to try somebody else's name next. Maybe it's just me. The unexpectedly answered phone call. I hear a lot from recruiters that they don't want to call because no one ever answers. And it's a waste of their time to call because nobody ever answers their phone. I want to remind you that sometimes people do answer their phones. I had Allison answer a couple of the phone calls that she got just to see how people would interact with her. And I will tell you it's extremely concerning when you do answer your phone and the person on the other end is like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't expect you to answer. Or, oh, hi, and then you can see frantically that they're looking on their computer screen trying to figure out whose number they just dialed. Again, practice, practice, practice. The duplicate emails, we saw a couple of these, the email that comes and the exact same thing comes a minute later. Typos. We recently secret shopped an institution that actually took a highly customized approach to communicating with inquiries, and they actually had someone sit down and send an email from their address saying, thank you so much for your inquiry. We've gone ahead and put the packet in the mail. Unfortunately, in what was a no more than 4-sentence email, there were 3 typos. That doesn't reflect well. Unkept promises. If you have an inquiry form, and if your automatic email says someone will follow up with you within 24 hours, or we are placing a packet in the mail, that really doesn't mean 34 days later it should arrive. It means someone needs to get on that fairly quickly. The 30-plus day wait time, again, some of that is with that mailed packet idea, but I've even had schools that have sent me an email months after I have inquired with them, and that's the first point of contact. Perhaps most embarrassing, I believe, was the idea, and again, in Allison's notes, that most of the schools just really weren't that interested in her. Just really weren't that interested in having her as a student. It's not the proper combination of mail and email and phone call. It's making somebody feel like you want them to join your institution, join your team. And for most of the schools that our secret shopper sent out communication to, she didn't get that sense at all. Some of the greatest successes, if you're sitting there waiting for what are some of the great ideas, emails from people included names, and I'm going to go ahead and say this. If you have the opportunity, you have to watch for the typos, but if you have the opportunity for someone to literally sit down and write an email, it doesn't have to be every email they get, but one of their emails to really be an email that Brenda Harms sits down and crafts to Betty Brown, that has a lot of impact. The offers to connect students to financial aid, academic deans, and career services. This made a huge impact on our intern who did this. This was done by a for-profit school, but I know of a couple of private institutions who do a very nice job with this, especially in the graduate market, the opportunity to connect to academic deans who are good at and willing to have recruitment-focused conversations with prospective students. And I know that's not the case for everyone that's out there, but when that can happen, fabulous. Also the opportunity to connect with someone in financial aid. If you have somebody who's really good on the phone in financial aid and just has that right personality to help walk people through what is really a cumbersome and confusing process, I think that that is a golden opportunity there. Often I don't want to talk to a recruiter. I know they're recruiting me. I want to get the straight story from the financial aid lady about how I'm going to pay for this, or the financial aid guy. I saw an institution that's doing free webinars on how to navigate financial aid, not for their institution, but just literally for all their grad students, for any academic program that they got an inquiry in for or from. They sent out 3 different email blasts inviting them to attend a free webinar on how to navigate financial aid. Brilliant idea. You're operating as a service. You also begin to get a sense of who's opening an email from your institution and engaging with you. You're being viewed as a resource that automatically puts you up a notch over other institutions who are not as helpful. The open house invites on finding your next job, resume writing, handling your finances in different economic times. Remember, we don't always have to be selling what we offer and what we do in our programs. We really need to incorporate some things that are of benefit to our prospective students. The personal handwritten note tucked in with the mailed packet. I've had the pleasure to be involved in about a dozen focus groups over the course of the last month, and I will tell you that in every one of those focus groups, somebody commented on getting a handwritten note from the person that they had talked to, and they remembered it. I know it takes time. I know it is a big expenditure of human resource. I think it is one that makes an impact because very few schools are doing it. Giving people that sense, in our case, our secret shopper, that we are truly interested in them. Hugely important as we move forward. I'm going to this is my final slide, so we're doing all right on time here. So next steps for you at your institution. I want you to have the opportunity to really take the webinar and then look at and effectively evaluate your recruitment shop. First and foremost, have you really had an honest conversation about your need and readiness for a more recruitment-focused workshop? Or more recruitment-focused shop. And I apologize, I'm just seeing I was fiddling with the slides and I got an extra space in there. Sorry about that. Is your institution prepared with your current population of recruiters to really put together a recruitment-focused shop? Do you think this is where your heads are at right now? Are you currently meeting your enrollment goals? And more importantly, can you meet the growth expectations that I know your institution probably has for you? If you're struggling on either of those points, take a look at your recruitment. It's not necessarily about, we need better marketing, we need more leads. Let's look at how we're working with people. I want to encourage you to evaluate your current situation, and if you need to, get professional help. One of my favorite comments made by a speaker at a conference I went to once is he said, you know, and he was a gentleman from a school, he said, I had to be willing to say, I need professional help. I just took a recruitment assessment yesterday to an institution, and one of the things that their VP of Enrollment said to me was, you've affirmed a lot of what I thought, and it has more impact because someone from the outside said it. Sometimes that's the job of someone from the outside. Don't be afraid to get some help in evaluating your current situation and taking a look at where you need to tighten things up. You will need to take an honest assessment of the players on your team. Is this the type of work that they can do or that they signed up to do when they took the job? I struggle right now because a number of recruitment staff members who are working currently in institutions really signed up for a job that was very different than the job that we will need them to do moving forward. That's hard stuff. I understand that fully. Assess your team. Create a basic process and a process that you require everyone to follow regardless of if they are very successful or not very successful. Process, process, process. That's really where the magic happens here. I think it's very, very important to train people. I think it is a horrible disservice that we often do to people in higher education to give them a job and expect them to be able to figure it out and do it. We are encouraging people in recruitment to sell a dream. Even if I have sold cars, cruises, food in the past, selling a dream is a different sort of business. We have to train people on how to do that. We have to train people to help them to understand the goals that they are trying to achieve with each one of these touch points. What most recruitment staff tell me when I talk to them about, half a dozen points of contact in the first 2 weeks is, oh my gosh, what in the world will we talk about? I don't have a reason to email. I don't have a reason to call. There should always be goals for each of those touch points. Work with people, train people, and then also train people on how to overcome objections. There will be a lot of them, and people need help with knowing how to do this. They need to have a clear idea of what their goal is every time they get on the phone and how to help people to understand, yes, we know it's expensive, and yes, it will be a commitment of time. Expectations and accountabilities, and I started the webinar with this, and I guess I'm going to end the webinar with it. I think expectations and accountabilities are critical within every industry, including higher education. Enrollment ultimately is held to one goal, and that's the final enrollment goal. But if you don't have a series of expectations and accountabilities along the way, you have no sense of if you're going to reach that enrollment goal or not. It's actually a series of small steps, which is what helps to make that enrollment number not seem quite so intimidating in the end. I want to encourage you all. I'm sorry, I wasn't certain if we'd have time for questions, and indeed not, because I've plowed right through this. I want to encourage you all on that form, the survey form at the end. There is a place where you can type in questions. If you have questions, please feel free to type in questions. I will respond to you individually. I also want to tell you, if you have an interest in asking a specific question or getting into a conversation about this specifically, talking about your own unique situation a little bit more specifically, don't hesitate. My phone number and my email address were at the front of this, or on that survey. Say, have Brenda give me a call, or have Brenda shoot me an email. I'm happy to connect with any of you further to discuss your own individual recruitment situation. I want to thank you for spending the time with us. I really appreciate it. I hope that this was a benefit to you and gave you some sense of what other institutions are doing, and I look forward to seeing your survey results at the end. Please take time to fill that out so we can know what to do differently for next time. Thank you so much, and have a lovely afternoon.